for me, I cannot go from like doing the dishes to like jumping your bones.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So
let's maybe address some of the things that could lay some groundwork that is intimacy, but is not like sex intimacy.
Welcome back to another episode of Smashed Oranges. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe down below. It really helps us bring you new content each and every week and keeps our community growing.
With that being said, today we're going to delve into something a little juicy. Some juicy details about to come our way or not, but we'll see what happens. Today we're going to talk a little bit about intimacy postpartum and what that looks like, because intimacy, when people hear the word, a lot of different things kind of come to mind. Some people think of sex, some people think of cuddling and hand holding and sweet notes. And so, Maddie, when you're postpartum with Arden, did you go into that experience having any expectations, or were you educated with what to expect with intimacy? And you can take that in whatever direction you'd like.
I think I'm sorry. I think I had an expectation that I wouldn't want to be intimate at all for a very, very long time. And I actually was surprised that I don't know if it was just like we were in a little love cloud.
Oh, that's
a
nice.
little love bubble, like the first couple weeks. I mean, we didn't end up doing any sort of we didn't have sex or anything, but I felt like those first couple weeks were really intimate. You know?
Mm-hmm. So intimate in the sense that you guys were really close as a couple.
Yeah.
From that experience.
Yeah, and I did feel like we were I felt like I wanted to be really cuddly, but cuddles were not really happening because of the C-section.
Yeah.
So it kind of turned into him just playing with my hair and stuff.
Oh, that's really sweet. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the perfect example, because regardless of if you had C-section or if you delivered vaginally or what have you, you're going to be uncomfortable a little bit postpartum. Your body's been through it. But yeah, I think I experienced the same thing, a little bit of a love bubble. You're like, oh my gosh, we've just created life.
Yeah, and you just cry about everything. You just yeah.
That's so nice that he was sweet in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And how, do you mind me asking? Maybe this is personal, but so you can red flag it. But how far along after you had Arden did you start to expand what your intimacy looked like? So once you started to recover.
I mean, I think, after not really being sexual for 6 weeks, Amari was 6 weeks is up, let's go.
And so what was your expectation then 6 weeks postpartum? Because I feel
I think I had a bit of an expectation because I had a C-section. I was like, oh, my vagina is going to be totally fine. I didn't push a baby out of there. Nothing got messed up down there. I was only 2 centimeters dilated when they took me for an emergency C-section. So, we're good to go. No.
Really?
No. Oh, my God. It hurt so bad.
No.
It was just a brick wall down there. It was just absolutely not. No.
Wow.
And so I remember Googling after we attempted to have intercourse for the first time, tight vagina or something after C-section. And it came up that when you have a C-section, because certain muscles are offline, your pelvic floor can kind of just take over and just lock up. And I've had another friend who also had an emergency C-section say the same thing, because I mentioned to her, oh yeah, it was not very good. She was like, oh my God, me too, but I thought I was just crazy. I was like, no, I think it's a lot more common than people think with that. And I think that's a bit of a myth, because people, I've heard people that don't have kids say things like, oh, I want to have a C-section because I don't want to mess anything up down there.
Oh, so you mean the myth being that you won't have any negative effects from a C-section?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. In terms of how your
vaginal health and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's not, so no doctor warned you that could
No.
be an option or a possibility?
No.
What the heck?
Okay, but also, they told me that even though I didn't push a baby out of there, and even though that part isn't, like, really doing much right now, that, like, there was still a serious risk of infection if we were to,
Oh, okay, yeah.
like, do that, because there's still a big open wound on the inside. Yeah. So they did tell me that.
Interesting.
But I don't recall anybody saying anything about, like, it might really hurt the first time you attempt that.
Interesting. Remind me again, Maddie, did you have midwives?
Yes.
So they didn't say anything about it either when you were postpartum? Or, like, leading up to it? Maybe, but maybe in passing?
Maybe. I feel like part of this is all just a blur.
Yeah. Well, because you weren't expecting the C-section, so probably,
Yeah,
like,
and
information kind of just went in
could
one
have
ear,
been,
out the other.
It could, well, I mean, even in, like, my home care visits and stuff after, and, like, my follow-up appointments, I feel like it might have been mentioned, but I feel like because we hadn't attempted to do it yet, it might have just been like, oh, yeah, okay, you know, when you're, like, listening.
Problem for down the road.
Yeah, when you're, like, listening to information and you're like, I'm taking this in, but I might not actually be, like, noting what you're saying.
Right, yeah.
I feel like they did talk to me in my midwife appointments, like follow-up appointments, about, like, what it would look like to be intimate with my partner again. And they said, just, like, don't put any pressure on yourself. Like, don't put any pressure on it. Like, you're, like, 6 weeks is, like, kind of the minimum, but, like, don't feel like you need to engage in that right away again.
Yeah, I remember getting that same talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, just be, like, really careful, really gentle.
Yeah.
Lots of lube, warm yourself up.
Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's interesting because when I asked you that question, if your midwives had said anything, then I, like, flipped it back on myself, because I was like, well, it could have been me, right? Like, I could have experienced an emergency C-section and not have been prepared for what my body would experience after that too. So, like, was I prepared for it? And the answer is no. Like, I wouldn't have known that would have an impact, like, on my pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And, like,
well, I also think too, like, there was a meeting we had with a doctor before we were discharged, and I feel like they went over a bunch of stuff, but I feel like I was in shock.
Totally.
I hadn't slept.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the conversation at all.
It'd be nice if they could send you, like, a document.
Wanting to get out of there.
Yeah,
by the time this conversation happened.
Yeah.
And I think there was a document that they gave us, and Amari put it.
So maybe they did. We're just glazing over all the resources they actually did give you.
I'm like,
maybe.
I don't know. I was just, like, wanted to get out of there, wanted to go home, wanted to sleep in my own bed. And I was just like, yeah, got it. What do we have to do with the car seat? Okay, cool, let's go.
Okay, so word of advice to our listeners then is, if you're preparing for labor and birth, maybe these are some things to mentally prepare for as part of your checklist. Like, depending on what circumstance I find myself in, what's the fallout going to be like, and, like, should I be... Because I feel like there's so much emphasis on the preparation for, like, labor and then delivery.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, care kind of just drops off. Like, I think we're very lucky in Canada, especially, to have the care that we have.
Well, I really appreciated, like, the midwife care that they come to the house after for the first week. Good. And then, like, I was struggling with breastfeeding the first couple days. And, like, that, having the midwife come to the house was really helpful to get that kind of under control. But
yeah, it's a whole whirlwind for sure. And then, like you're saying, you're kind of in this bubble of, like, brand new baby and new partnership. But then eventually that starts to wear off. And I know from me and Josh's experience,
always starts to wear off.
it always does. And it's the sad part is that it starts to have, like, a negative tinge. Like, okay, well, now there's the expectations are starting to rise again from your partner, or, like, even from yourself. Maybe you're like, oh, once that 6 weeks comes and goes, maybe too, then there starts to be that added, like, maybe some guilt that, like, oh, I should be instigating something, or I should be reciprocating some pleads for intimacy in whatever way that looks. Because I remember, how many months was I postpartum? I think I was, like, 4 or 5 months. Math. Because it was in the new year, and I was talking to friends about sex life with a baby, and I was just like, guys, my libido is, lower than low. And I feel really bad because when I was sick my entire 9 months pregnant, I was like, Josh, get away from me. Do not touch me. I was not interested in sex at all when I was pregnant. Yeah. Some people get an increase in libido when they're pregnant because of your increased blood volume and like all the things are happening. And it can be really good for people. But for me, I was just like, please don't. And so I felt bad because he'd been very gentle and kind with me that whole 9 months.
Same.
And then afterwards, I was like, oh, stick around, buddy. We'll just wait and see what happens. Because I just never wanted to do it again. I was like, that's it. One baby and I'm celibate.
And you're not allowed to leave.
You have to stay. But it was hard because like I could like, you know, because your partner like wants that connection. And if you're like anything like Maddie and I, our partners, both top physical love language. Yeah. Like love language is top tier for them. Yeah. And as a partner, I want to be engaging in whatever love language my partner needs. You know? Same. Like you want to give that to them, but it's so hard. Like, and I don't think people really grasp it until you've had a baby and then you are under the demand of this little person at all hours of the day. Yep. And so to give yourself to somebody else, like anything else to somebody else just feels like you're past capacity. Yeah. And so that was a huge struggle for me. So did you feel like that?
Yeah. One of the things that I really struggled with was because I breastfed Arden for 16 months. And the entire, even still now a little bit, I'm like, don't touch my boobs. Yes. I'm like, quit trying to touch my boobs. I'm actually going to chop your dick off.
Those are for babies only.
Like babies only. Don't touch them. Don't look at them. And he's like,
double-edged sword. And I'm like,
it got to the point where I was like, I swear to God, if I have to tell you one more time to stop trying to touch my boobs, I'm going to kill you.
I really hope y'all can relate to this.
And then he's like, I just don't get it. I just need a little like boob touch. And I'm like, can we not? Like, I don't care. It's my body. You don't have a little human suckling on, you know, like 10 times a day in the middle of the night.
Yeah. So real though, right? Because and that's a really good point that your perception of like your body and sexuality changes so much. Because before,
I still don't feel like my boobs are sexual right now.
Oh, same. Well, I'm still breastfeeding too. So I'm like, and then I'm pregnant. And so my nipples are all like sensitive. I'm like, nobody's allowed to touch them. Yeah. We don't want anybody near this.
Nothing.
But yeah, it like totally changes the name of the game. Because before, and on top of that, like there's the whole body image layer too, right? Yeah. And so it's like maybe you're a little self-conscious and you don't maybe feel quite at home in your body yet, and that can take a long time too. And I feel like partners, it's hard for them to wrap their heads around that because they have not experienced that side of it. Yeah. And so for them, this is where a huge communication component comes in, is you have to communicate that like more than you might expect. You have to communicate that. And probably more than once.
Yeah. You know? I would say Omari's been really, really good about that whole part of it. And I just feel like the whole, like, pregnancy, postpartum, right up till now, like, he's been really, really good about, like, reassuring me that, like, he still thinks I'm beautiful and I'm still good looking. And,
that's
like,
so great.
That he's still attracted to me. And, like, some days it's easier to receive those compliments than others. But, well, like, I just really appreciate that he's consistent with it, you know?
Yeah. That is super nice. And I think that speaks volumes for your partnership. And that can help with like the guilt part of it. That's what I've felt, at least, is like it's extra validation that you're not just like vying for my body, you know? Like when you're young and maybe like fresh in a relationship, it's like really exciting, and that's like all you want. But as you get further into your relationship, it's like, this is really important to me that I can say no to you and it's going to be okay. Like it's not going to wear away at our relationship. And if it does, like that's okay too, because that's also natural. But to address that is the important part. Yeah. Right? It's like, hey, I'm struggling because I feel like you're not reciprocating my bits for intimacy can we address like what this looks like for us? Because I know that's been an issue for me and Josh.
I think where I find it difficult is like, I think we don't really get out as often together as we used to. It's like, you know, I feel like when we do have time alone, it's like after Arden's gone to bed, and then after we've cleaned up the house, and then after, like, I mean, sometimes him or I is like working in the evenings, or we're like editing podcast episodes, and then it's like, okay, now it's 10:30 and I'm just tired, and I just like, it's kind of a joke in our relationship. I'm like, don't try anything after 10:30, it's gonna be a no. And so sometimes he'll come home at like 10:25 and be like, baby, and I'm like, no.
That guy is like such a jokester, man. He's so funny.
Yeah.
Funny, but not in the moment, right? You're like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, and then he's like, why? It's before 10:30. And I'm like, but for me, I feel like I need kind of like an intimate moment that's not just, like, for me, I cannot go from, like, doing the dishes to, like, jumping your bones.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So,
like, let's maybe address some of the things that could lay some groundwork that is intimacy, but is not, like, sex intimacy.
Like,
for partnership.
Like, for me, like, cuddling in the bed.
Nice.
You know? And, like, having a conversation, or playing a board game, or just, like, having one-on-one time together. That's not.
Yeah.
You know? Or, like, brushing my hair.
Yeah. Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
You know what I've heard is really interesting is that eye contact is huge. And I noticed it in myself recently. I've kind of connected the dots that when I'm not feeling vulnerable, or when I'm not feeling open to being intimate, like in whatever fashion, or if I'm not feeling in a safe, calm space within myself, I avoid eye contact. And so there's science and studies to back this. I wish I had like the references available, but the first step to engaging in more intimacy, just as a connection with your partner, is to engage in more direct eye contact.
Interesting.
And so that, and a 10 seconds, 10 or 15 second hug. Again, dang, I never get the references right, but if like sitting down and having a conversation with your partner feels like a big ask right now, you can start with, like, as soon as your partner comes into your room or walks in the door from work or what have you, engage in like a 10 or 15 second unbroken hug. Yeah. And then look into each other's eyes. Yeah. Because that can be really vulnerable. And I've seen other videos of people doing this for an extended period of time where it's like you push it to the max. Like you do it for like 3 minutes.
It's called dyads.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like actually kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like it's a little bit soul wrenching because you're watching these two people connect. And as time goes on, you're seeing barriers come down. And for some reason, like whatever emotions are buried deep, they start to come up.
Yeah. It can be a really intense experience.
Yes, very intense is what I've heard. I've never gone to that extent, but
oh, I have. It's interesting. Yeah,
maybe that's like a date night experiment for me and Josh.
Sit and stare into each other's souls.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard other people call it soul gazing.
Oh, that sounds much more romantic.
Yeah,
I could engage in soul gazing, maybe.
Yeah,
but yeah, like little things. I mean that. Soul gazing sounds intense, but little things. What else? Because I know for me it's like, well, you were saying like you can't go from dishes to
I just need there to be a little bit of like space created for me to unwind. Like I feel like I have to transition from like one brain to the other brain. You know.
When I was, again, back to this like 4 or 5 months postpartum, when I was really struggling with my libido, part of it was that my brain was so distracted with like, oh, is Poppy going to wake up? Because this was also during a period where she wasn't like on a specific sleep schedule. And like we often would have to go in like every 20 minutes and settle her. And it was just rough season. And we're just like, what else do we do to keep this child like asleep for longer? Yeah. And I just remember being like, I can't commit like a 30-minute makeout session because I don't know if my child's going to wake up, and my brain was just so distracted by that. Yeah. And we actually had a neighbor suggest, she's like, I'd be totally happy to take Poppy for a little bit so you guys can schedule some time together. Like, it doesn't have to be sex. It could be like cleaning your house together. It could be sitting and having a chat. It could be going out for lunch. But just a time where you can reconnect. And if it does turn into sex, then great, because then baby's out of the house. She's not gonna like wake up or like be around. And so I think that was like the good permission that I needed, because I think we did take her up on it. And she took Poppy for a bit. But I was also hesitant at the beginning because I was like, oh, I've heard of people scheduling sex. So that sounds so not sexy. But, it actually is quite realistic, because that's what you're saying is like to create that space. You kind of have to be like, okay, at 9 o'clock tonight, we're going to be having sex. And so all day today, I'm going to be laying the groundwork. I'm going to be like sending some cutesy texts to him. And like, I'm going to be shaving and like wearing some cute outfits, set up some lingerie maybe, get the things ready. And like just be in like a different headspace. And I think that makes sense to me. Especially as a parent.
I've tried to tell Mar, I'm like, if you want to have sex, you should turn on some nice music and light the candles and turn the light off.
Set the tone.
Yeah, and every time he does that, it works. So I don't know why he doesn't do that more often.
Might need like a sticky note reminder somewhere.
No.
Sexy time requires X, Y, and Z.
I'm going to do that this week.
You should.
I'm going to change the requirements, though, each day.
Hey, that's kind of fun, too, because you can make it a game.
Yeah.
That's cute.
I think, though, I would want to keep the requirements to be, like, stuff that, like, contributes to the sexy time and not, like, household tasks.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because what I don't like is if sex feels transactional.
Oh,
I feel like that's super not sexy.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you should do the dishes because you live in the house and the dishes need to get done.
Amen.
Not because you want to have sex with me.
Amen.
That's stupid.
Yeah. Well, and the more organic that feels, like that partnership, if you feel like he is more than willing and able to take care of whatever needs to get done in the house, like if that feels organic in the sense that he just does it and you don't have to ask him, that to me is like,
and I mean, like,
I feel more engaged with you because I don't feel the weight of all these responsibilities. Like, that's when I start to let my guard down and be like, you know what, I appreciate you. And like, I can see our partnership and I can see like old us in a sense. Like, I appreciate like our friendship and the way that you look out for me and, step into that role. Yeah.
And so I will, though, like, if I do need help with specific things, I will still ask him to do those things. But like, it's separate from...
If you do this, then we'll have sex. Yeah.
I just don't like that. It just feels yucky.
I agree. Yeah. Same here. Whatever works for people, though. Like, yeah. And that's just it, is like, nobody can tell you what it's going to be like. Like, you can prepare mentally or physically, kind of what we're saying. Like, physically, your body is going to probably feel like this. Talk to a pelvic floor specialist and be mindful of this and that. But mentally, it's such a huge, huge game mentally, right? Because your whole life has shifted dramatically. Yeah. And so, like, why would we expect our sex lives or our intimate lives with our partners to have not been affected when, like, literally every other facet of our lives has been affected by childbirth? Yeah.
So... I was reading a post on a Facebook group today kind of about this subject, and they were just saying, like, they're, like, in the roommate phase together because they just had a kid and blah, 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 and, like, that's okay, and they know eventually one day they'll, like, get back to each other, and I just didn't really know how that sat with me.
Yeah. It feels sad for me.
It feels sad for me, too. And, like... Although there are some days I definitely feel like we're in the roommate phase where I'm just like, nothing's happening. And like, honestly, there's days I'm totally cool with it because my, like you said, like, I feel like my libido is not like, I feel like it takes a lot for me to get there, you know? And I do think part of that's hormonal because when I'm ovulating,
hugely,
I'm ready to go. And when I'm not ovulating, I could care less.
Hello, baby number 2. Called out. Amen.
Yeah. But there are days when I just feel like, yeah, cool, we can be roommates today.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, like, for what duration of time do you let that go on before you're like, okay, maybe we should do something about this? And then what do you do about it?
Right. See, and it feels sad to me because I was really scared about that when I was pregnant with Poppy. That was another thing. There were like so many things I addressed with my therapist. I was a nervous wreck, man. I was so anxious about what my life was going to look like postpartum. And that was one of them. I was like, I don't want to resent my partner, or I don't want this like massive chasm to be created between us, you know? And so, again, every single episode, Josh gets credit for something. But this is something that I addressed early on with him. I was like, I really need our communication to be spot on, because if I don't communicate about how I'm feeling, then I become resentful quite quickly. And so, yeah, he was really good with taking care of me physically postpartum, you know, like did all the things, made sure that I was taken well care of. And then also, when I did notice that I was starting to get upset about certain things, like he would also notice. I think that's one thing I appreciated about him. And that was another step of intimacy from him towards me, was that he came to me at like saying, I'm seeing you're upset about this, or I'm witnessing this. Tell me more about how you're feeling about it. Because in the moment, sometimes you don't know how you feel about it. You just know that there's some emotions bubbling up.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm feeling really mad about this, but like, why? Because it logically doesn't feel like a big deal.
Right.
And so for somebody to come and say, I'm a safe space for you to talk to about this, that can just open up the process a little bit and be like, okay, let's chip away at this. And then as you're talking, at least for myself, hear myself talk out loud. I'm like, oh, I'm starting to connect some puzzle pieces as to why this is a big deal for me.
Right.
And so that was really important for us to feel like, okay, I'm not chasing him down to tell him how I'm feeling, to tell him how his actions are impacting me, you know? And so, that's a big one for sure. And it continues to be a big one now because, during the second pregnancy, like it's the same old song and dance. Like I'm like, don't touch me. I don't want to be, I don't want to be close to you. I appreciate the bids for attention and stuff, and so then he's okay telling me too, like, this is how I'm feeling about your actions about this. And I can be open to receiving that, you know? And so just being willing to give and take and be humble enough to talk about stuff or ask, to come and ask, like, okay, I'm willing to take what you're feeling right now.
That's a really good point. I think if I look at intimacy from more of an emotional standpoint, I feel like having a kid together has brought us way closer on a like emotional intimacy level. Especially like while I was dealing with like postpartum depression, like there was a few nights I would just like, I had a few panic attacks like in the middle of the night where I was just like back in the OR room and just like felt like I wanted to run, but like I couldn't run. I was just like this panicked feeling. And like, there were nights when Mari would just like come and like sit beside me on the floor and just like hold me until it stopped, you know? And then we could like talk about it after or whatever. But like, I do feel like since, like going through childbirth and like the whole like baby thing together, I feel like there is nothing between us that is like not, I don't want to say like, it's not, boundaries not the word I'm looking for, but
there's
like,
no like walls or barriers.
Yeah. Or like, just like, there's no shame, I guess, anymore between us. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm walking around naked right now. Like I don't know. Like, just like things.
It's a new level of vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's awesome for you guys. And that makes me happy because that shows that you guys have, you purposefully went through that experience and it unified you. What makes me sad about that post about the roommate phase is when people go through something and then it becomes like I experience this and you experience this rather than we experience this. And I think that's part of what the roommate phase is for people, is it becomes like a my perspective versus your perspective kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's accurate? I mean, it's always going to depend on the people, but
yeah,
that's what I can imagine would make the biggest difference for my marriage, is the roommate phase would feel like it's me versus you.
Yeah.
Or like we're two separate identities kind of floating around the same house, living separately, you know?
Right.
Like back to what the title is, like the name of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you put it like that, Omari and I don't feel like roommates ever.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well,
there's just sometimes we have more sex than others.
Friends with benefits.
Omari's not going to let you put him back in the friend zone.
No. He's worked too hard for that.
He worked too hard for that. No. And it is funny, though. Like, I feel like even when it comes back to, like, the sex stuff, it's like, once we're in the middle of the action, I can enjoy it. You know? It's just sometimes, like, I forget that I enjoy it, and then until it's happening, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, this was an all right plan.
Relatable. Josh says that to me, too. He's like, you just have to remember you actually like it. I'm like, yeah. You're right. But it is hard, and I think that's a pretty widespread experience for a lot of moms.
And I think feeling touched out, too, is a pretty, especially in those early days, it's like, okay, I've had this baby on me all day long. I'm just like, haven't had 5 seconds to myself.
Yeah.
I find that part a little bit easier now because I'm not breastfeeding anymore. Arden kind of goes and like entertains himself sometimes. Like he's pretty good at independent play.
That's great.
And so I feel a little bit less touched out these days.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great point, is that there will be a period of time where you're just like, my capacity for like physical touch might be
at its maximum.
Yeah. Like, might be just tapped out. And that's where we go back to what we were saying earlier, is like, what other ways can you engage in intimacy that's not physical touch? And I think, I'm sorry to put like gender onto this, but like, I think a lot of males could probably use some time to sit and think about what other ways that they can, you know, create that like safe, loving space that isn't physical touch.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's comes very naturally for a lot of men.
And I find too, for me, and it's kind of what I was trying to say earlier too, is like when I feel like there's a safe, intimate space where there's no pressure to have sex, then I'm actually more inclined to want sex.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
I just need to feel like there's no pressure on it first, because the pressure for me just turns me off.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found any ways that get you in the mood to initiate?
Oh.
Should I give you a second to think about it? Because the reason why I ask is because I just went out with a friend the other day. And we were talking about how like smutty books are super trendy right now.
Oh yeah, I haven't read any of those, but I've been told that they're really good.
Me neither, but I've also heard similar things. I'm like, this is crazy that it's like so normalized. Like people just be out here reading some crazy stuff, just sitting on the C train. Everyone knows what that book is. It's just so funny to me. Like, power to you. But we were saying how it's just like a different way to get you in the mood. And so it just made me think about how like it's kind of like a turn of the tables now, where like women's, I think, are taking some power in it and being like, you know, I'm feeling pretty sexy right now. Like, I'm going to initiate.
Yeah, I think for me, like music, if I'm really intentional about like what kind of music I put on.
Fascinating.
Can be an inspiration for me.
Okay, cool.
I find like just like, yeah, that's an interesting question.
Right? It kind of does make you ask yourself a little bit, because I'm asking myself the same thing. I'm like, I think for myself, I really have to rely on like my feelings for Josh as like a man.
Same.
You know, like I have to take all of the external like worries about life and pressures about this and that, and like thinking about Poppy or thinking about what argument we had the other day, like I just have to think about like our connection as two individuals who like really enjoyed each other's company.
Yeah.
And I think he's really sexy, and you know, we just have a good time together.
Yeah, you do.
Again, hello, baby number 2. But I think that's important just to like go back to your like groundwork and be like, you know what? I think you're hot and I really like who you are.
Yeah.
And to, and then to build it up after that, being like, you know, kind of making like little connections during the day, or like send a sexy text, or kind of what I was saying earlier, like get yourself hyped.
I am like
you know?
high key guilty of like sending the sexy text, and then he'll come home and I'll be like,
never mind,
sleeping. Like, I have a headache.
Oh no.
Or, but sorry, to add on to your question though, there is one thing that like I actually like being like the big spoon. Like if he's like, if he's like, I do this a little bit less now because usually Arden winds up in the bed with us in the mornings. But like I used to like roll over and like be like the big spoon and just like relax on his back. And for whatever reason, that was like, that would get me in the mood, you know? But I just like needed a minute to just like, you know? And then I'd be like, okay.
Yep.
And then we'd go to work. But now we don't do that because Arden gets up and we have to deal with a kid, you know?
Oh, that's a shame. It'll come back sometime.
Yeah, when he's like 6 and we can lock the door and be like, turn on cartoons in the living room.
Or you gotta schedule some time where it's like evening and he's in bed and you just cuddle on the couch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super nice. Josh and I do the same thing, which is funny because both of our partners are like big men and we're like small. We're like the same size. We're just like, you big bear of a man.
Yeah. But I just feel like it makes me feel safe.
Oh,
you know?
That's such a good phrase for it. Yeah. You have to feel safe. Oh, yeah. Again, such a mental game, right?
Yeah, it is. And I also think, too, just like riding the ebbs and flows, too.
Well, and that's where having clear expectations for each other is, you know, again, back to that safe space. Like, you have to be able to say to your partner, like, I love you. I can't do it right now, but I want to sometime soon. Like, let's set a date for it, or like, whatever, or vice versa. Like, hey, I would like you to initiate, or
one thing I do want to look into at some point, I just haven't yet, is like actually getting my hormones tested to see what's happening there.
Yeah.
Because I had somebody tell me that, after her baby, that like a whole 2 years went by, her sex drive was still non-existent, and she went and got her hormones tested, and they were a little bit like, she was able to like balance them again, and then her sex drive came back.
That's super valid.
And so, like, I would be really curious to investigate that a little bit more for myself and just see, like, where my hormones are at. Because, like I was saying, like, when I'm ovulating, I'm ready to go. But, like, I feel like the second I'm not ovulating, I'm like, take it or leave it.
That's a great point, that we should be aware of what our bodies are going through.
Yes, because it might not always be a mental, emotional reason for why you don't feel like being intimate.
Yeah, could very well. That's a really good point. It could very well be physical.
Yeah, it could be like, yeah.
Another point, maybe we wrap up with this too, on the physical, is if you do have any sort of like sexual or birth trauma, to be really mindful of that, because that can be really detrimental. And you know, the more time that goes on, the more that you like continue to try, and then it kind of fails, or you know, it just like builds up in your head. I think that's something to address with a professional, you know, whether that's a mental health professional or a pelvic floor professional or what have you. Because you definitely need to look at every aspect of your physical, mental, and emotional health for intimacy. So, but yeah, it does change a lot. But we hope that this gave you a little bit of an insight into maybe you're not alone in some of the struggles that you're going through. Nothing's forever. I think that's going to be like a tagline for pretty much every episode, is like, if it's a struggle right now, hopefully it's not forever. But seek out those who can help you. And we would love to, again, to hear any and all experiences from our listeners. And with that, we'll wrap things up. Thanks so much, guys, for tagging along, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. Much love. Bye.
Bye.